And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Wednesday, April 2nd. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into all that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. It makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So we're going to start off the show. We are going to talk about Steph Curry and his performance last night, hitting 12 three-pointers and scoring 52 points in the Warriors' win over the Grizzlies. And we'll talk about, where they stack up against the other playoff teams in the Western Conference. Then in the second part of the show, we will get into discussing John Harbaugh. So this happened last week, but I didn't cover it. We'll talk about him getting a 3-year contract extension with the Ravens, and we'll talk about whether that's a good move or not. So he will continue to be the Ravens head coach for the foreseeable future. I know some Ravens fans have a different opinion. I know that, but I wanted to talk about that as well. We'll also get into talking about the Braves. They've gotten off to a rough start, and they've also had a player, a newly acquired player, a player that they signed in the offseason, Jurickson Profar. He was suspended for 80 games for PED use. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the possibility of Brian Snitker, their manager. I almost said head coach because I'm so used to talking about football. Manager, maybe not continuing to manage the team beyond 2025. We'll get into that. We'll also talk about the top revenge games in the NFL going into next season. The schedule has not come out yet, but we know the opponents for everybody. So we'll talk about the best revenge games for next year. And then in the final part of the show, I will continue my season overviews. And today we will be covering the Houston Texans. So let's get into the first topic, which is discussing Steph Curry and his performance last night. And it's one of those things that, it doesn't really, shouldn't say it doesn't impress you, but we've seen this so many times with him, and it does. You know what it is? It doesn't surprise us. It doesn't surprise us what Steph Curry is able to do. And it's good to see him back on the court because, obviously there was that scary situation, last week or a week and a half ago when, you had the incident where he fell, landed on his backside and, he missed some games due to that. But, he's back and, he is going to be the driving force for the Warriors as we get into the playoffs. If the Warriors are going to make a deep playoff run, now they have played really well since they got Jimmy Butler, but let's be honest, they're not making a deep playoff run if they don't have Steph Curry. Steph Curry is the engine. Now, we talked about playoff Jimmy in our production meeting, and the thing is we really haven't gotten to see playoff Jimmy because, he also got hurt during one of the playing games when Miami recently made the playoffs. Well, and I think that was two. Was that last year or was that 2 years ago? Either way, we haven't gotten to see the playoff Jimmy that we saw when he took the Heat to the finals. So if we can get playoff Jimmy and if we can get playoff Steph, the Warriors are going to be a very dangerous team. And Draymond Green, of course, you have him too. And, he's more so a guy, that we look at as helping out on the defensive side of the ball. But obviously he does have big nights scoring-wise at times. But it's Steph Curry. And Steph Curry just continues to amaze us with what he's done over the course of his career. And, look, I don't look at the Warriors as being a team that can get to the finals, but they have that championship pedigree, right? They have that experience. And you have to give them that respect. I definitely think they're a team that can make it, at least to the second round. and then you roll the dice and see what happens. But I still don't think they have quite enough to get to the finals. Because in years past, when the Warriors have gotten to the finals, well, first of all, they had superstars all over the place. I mean, you had Prime Clay, you had obviously Kevin Durant, right? But the team is not, and they also had a pretty good bench back in the day too. I don't think they have quite as deep a team as they have had. So, we'll have to see how it goes. But this was a big game last night, because the Warriors are going up against a team that, is right now ahead of them in the Memphis Grizzlies, who actually, let go of their head coach. And we did talk about that in our production meeting as well, which, is kind of an interesting move just because, we're towards the end of the season here and the Grizzlies are a playoff team. They're going to be a team that makes the postseason. So it's kind of odd seeing that go down. So, I mean, they didn't like how they were performing as of late. And that continued last night, even after the move. Yeah, because right now, Warriors are a half game behind the Grizzlies. But, yeah, so Steph Curry last night, we'll get into the Western Conference standings, but looking at Curry's night, he had a double-double, 10 rebounds, close to getting a triple-double. He had 8 assists last night. 52 points, went 16 of 31, 12 of 20 from 3, 8 for 8 on free throws. Warriors actually did not miss free throws last night. And that is key in the game because they only ended up winning by 9 points. But they made all their free throws, so that was very important. They shot 22 of 56 from 3, 42 of... Wow, they took 99 shots last night. So, they shot 42% last night. Grizzlies shot 47%. The Warriors out-rebounded them. Defensively, actually, the Grizzlies, defensive rebounds, they out-rebounded the Warriors. But, yeah, Warriors picked up a big win. 27 points from Jimmy Butler, speaking of. Moses Moody had 10. Draymond Green had 13. He actually had a triple-double. He had 13 rebounds, or 13 points, 10 rebounds, 12 assists. And he did get contributions from guys off the bench. For the Grizzlies, John Morant, 36 points on the night. Desmond Bane had 19. Zach Edey had 10. He also had 16 rebounds. Jaren Jackson, he had 22 points. So, yeah, good game last night, though. And, some other games as well. You actually had the Nuggets and the Timberwolves going to double overtime. Timberwolves ended up winning that game 140 to 139. That was one of the better games. That was probably the best game from last night. But looking at the standings, so right now the Warriors are the 5th seed, and actually they are ahead of the Grizzlies. So the Grizzlies are half a game behind. I might have said the Warriors are half a game behind, but the Warriors are half a game ahead of the Grizzlies now, and this potentially sets up a 4 versus 5 matchup in the first round between LeBron James and Steph Curry. Now, if I'm going to be honest, I hope that doesn't happen. I want to see them play against each other possibly later in the playoffs. But, look, if we get that in the first round, you'll take it. Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry, the Warriors newly acquired Jimmy Butler against, LeBron with newly acquired Luka Doncic. So, you'll take that. The Lakers right now are a half game behind the Nuggets, so it's possible they could pass the Nuggets. But it's pretty close in the Western Conference. And then you got the Rockets in second, and then, the Thunder, they, of course, they're the number 1 seed. That's how it's going to end. Nobody's catching up to them. But they're actually the only team right now that has clinched a playoff spot in the Western Conference. And then you look over at the Eastern Conference side, the Cavs, the Celtics, the Knicks, and the Pacers, they have all clinched playoff spots as well. The Knicks picked up a win last night. They knocked off the 76ers. They'll be playing the Cavs tonight in Cleveland. With no Jalen Brunson, so don't like their chances in that game. But actually, the Celtics have won 9 in a row. They're 4 games back of the Cavs, so there's, an outside chance they they could still maybe catch up to them and pass them for the number 1 seed, but I don't think that's going to happen. So yeah, no, other than the Thunder, nobody else has clinched a playoff spot yet, but we'll start seeing that, as we move along here. But let me know what you guys think though about Steph Curry's performance last night. How far do you think the Warriors can go in the playoffs? Look, like I said, you got to give them that respect. They could definitely make a run, but I feel like this is one of those years where that might not happen. But hey, if playoff Jimmy shows up and you got Steph Curry, you never know. Now, Steph Curry, one last thing I wanted to bring up, he became the third player in NBA history with 50 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists, and 5 steals in a game. And he joins Rick Barry and Anthony Davis. He scored 32 points in the first half, shooting 8 of 10 from three-point range. And he tied LeBron James for the third most 30-point halves since the 97-98 season. He recorded a 6th game with at least 8 3-pointers and a half, the most ever. First ballot Hall of Famer. But yeah, we're winding down here. Let's see if the Warriors can go on a run in this postseason. So we are going to take our first break of the show now. And then when we come back, we will talk about John Harbaugh receiving a contract extension from the Ravens. We'll talk about if that's a good move or not. I'll give you my thoughts. So that is what we will do when we come back from our first break of the show. So, with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.